as we make our way into this unit, it's important for us to engage with two, aspects of the topic. One is life before the Europeans arrive on the frontier, and secondly is how that history is recorded. So both of these carry problems for us as a historian. In this video, I want to introduce you to a few of the sources you could run across and the types of sources that you almost certainly will run across. Firstly, the historians writing on this can publish in all sorts of forms. They might be small pamphlet-style histories such as this one by Ray Kirchhoff. Next, you'll run across local histories like this one by Mark Copland about the Darling Downs, looking at the dispossession of the Aborigines. Very reputable histories, but very much tied to a local history. Then you've got your documentary histories and state-style histories. This example here is of a documentary history. Basically, the University of Queensland collects a whole stack of primary sources, puts it into one book. You get that style of history. They carry a little bit of commentary. That might be useful for you. And you will also get summary type histories. This one and Ross Johnson's History of Queensland, looking at the colonial life. One to watch out for that will be good is to find voices of Indigenous on the frontier, and these ones are an interesting sort of source. I'll try and get the full title in there for you. That's how we're going. Yep, we've got in there, Hidden Histories. Indigenous histories tend to be written in a very different way, often by non-academics. And then lastly, there are some seminal sources. There's a number of books, for example, such as The Other Side of the Frontier by Henry Reynolds. But in this video, I'm going to draw your attention to Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. It's a book that's got a huge amount of respect out in the community. And there's also books by people like Bruce Gamage, and I'll deal with those for you now. So what I want you to think about is how we address Indigenous life prior to and at the point of first European contact. Now, certainly the earliest we would put that when it comes to dealing with the British is 1770 and James Cook travelling up the east coast and making his maps. Certainly, we could also date that from 1788 and the arrival of the First Fleet with Arthur Phillip. But we also have, due to the nature of the frontier, a series of almost leapfrog type moments where first contact happens progressively for over a century, where this first contact experience happens from region to region, area to area. So we're trying to get a sense a little bit of what it was like on the Indigenous side of the frontier. And a couple of books that give a really good insight into that are Bill Gamage's The Biggest Estate on Earth, published in 2011, and also, there's its cover there by Bill Gamage, and also Dark Emu, which I just held up, 2014, Bruce Pascoe. Now, Bruce Pascoe is an interesting guy. He works currently at the University of Technology in Sydney. He's an Indigenous writer, he's an educator, he's a researcher in their Indigenous Studies unit, but he's not known really as a historian, but he's doing work in the field of history. So we as historians are working out, well, where does he sit in terms of authority? Are his ideas reliable? Being Indigenous, does his work carry biases? And I'm sure it does, much like everybody else's. I guess one of the tasks that I want you to do growing out of this introductory video is to come to your own conclusions about his reliability. Certainly, I find him quite a reliable source, but that isn't to say he doesn't have elements of perspective that we need to take into account, and we need to see it as coming from a particular time and place in Indigenous studies in Australia. Bill Gamage is an interesting fellow too. He's currently working at the Australian National University. He is a historian, he is an academic, and you might actually be familiar with some of his work. Bill Gamage wrote a book upon which one of the most famous movies about Australia's involvement in World War I was based, the movie Gallipoli, directed by Peter Weir, which you might have seen. Gamage wrote the book upon which that fictional story was based. In your notes, in your OneNote, I've suggested that you research each of these writers. I think they'll be quite helpful for you when you are looking into your own sources to use in the ISI. I think their voices are well worth including in your commentary. You need to weigh up their usefulness in our understanding of the frontier wars, and you need to weigh up their reliability. Let's take a brief glimpse inside Dark Emu. Dark Emu gives a huge number of primary sources based upon explorers and settler experiences. This particular experience that I want to put before you is the experience of the Beveridge family, who were graziers in the Murray River district north of Melbourne in 1843 or thereabouts. They tell the story of Peter and Andrew Beveridge, two brothers, and James Kirby, a friend. Let's have a look at what it picks up on. It tells a background to the causes of some fighting during the frontier wars. They talk about the nature of that violence. And at this point, we're seeing the voice of a secondary source. But then a primary source is included. And you might like to pause this from time to time to read in detail. I'm just talking you through it. Something I draw to your attention at this point is that Pascoe uses footnotes, and you'll see this in a lot of sources. I suspect you may want to get into these books and track back the footnotes to their original source. So at the end of the chapter, you'll see what that little 8 represents, and you may be able to find the full source online. Pascoe goes on to talk about the taking of land, the deliberate misunderstandings, perhaps in this case, of Europeans who are wanting to take over the land. He points out that the graziers themselves acknowledge open warfare. He talks about the molestation of women, the real causes, as opposed to perhaps the official causes. Perhaps it's not just the economic warfare of Aboriginal people and Indigenous people killing sheep to resist the movement of graziers into their territory. He suggests in this case that the Beveridge family knew that the cause of the violence here had been the, rape of Indigenous women by Europeans. He then goes on to the deliberate misunderstandings which Europeans might have taken advantage of by using their law in order to take land. So some interesting understandings here, and this is the kind of thing you'll find in a book like Dark Emu, and you'll find it in others as well, which I wanted to show you. So, when you're dealing with sources such as Dark Emu, such as Bill Gamage's biggest estate in the world, what you want to do is explore the sources that they explore. Drill down into their footnotes a little. Try and track back their work in order to find some excellent primary source material that will help you work on your ISI.